Have you ever heard someone say, everyone is a little autistic? While I'm sure some who said this were trying to be supportive, this expression or belief is not helpful at all. For example, what if I said, everyone is a little blind? Would you agree with that? Of course not. Blindness, legally speaking, has a specific definition. Well, now, a person who is legally blind does have some degree of sight. It is not accurate to say everyone is a little blind just because their vision is not 20/20. Now, this is not a perfect illustration, but I think you will understand how it might be a helpful comparison. Getting back to autism, while it is true that all autistic people have some degree of social challenges, just because a person is socially awkward or even overly friendly doesn't mean they are automatically on the autism spectrum. Social differences or difficulties is the first of two major criteria that an individual must have to possibly be diagnosed autistic. In fact, in the social differences category, there are actually three subsections that must be true as part of a qualifying diagnosis of autism. Unfortunately, in the official language, the wording is more negative. That is, it uses deficits instead of differences, as I've used up to now. So moving forward, I will sometimes use this more negative language, even though I believe it is better to use a more neutral type of wording. So in the DSM-5 TR, there are three subcategories. They are social emotional reciprocity, two, nonverbal communicative behaviors, and three, developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. So a person must have difficulties or differences, deficits in the official language, in each of the three areas to meet the first of two major criteria for an autism diagnosis. Thus, just because a person doesn't make eye contact or has a lack of facial expression, as a couple examples from the second category, this doesn't mean a person is a little autistic. It merely means that they have characteristics that are part of the criteria to be diagnosed autistic. If you know of someone, and who doesn't, who is always interrupting conversations and doesn't seem to get the back and forth nature of conversations, it doesn't automatically mean that person is autistic. This individual merely has one characteristic from the first major category that would be considered consistent with an autistic person. Then, in the third category, a person isn't a little autistic if they have trouble making friends, unless, of course, they also meet the other two criteria, as well as the additional criteria we haven't discussed yet. Well, let's move on to the next major criterion, which has to do with patterns of behavior, interest, or activities. There are four subcategories in this section. However, a person only has to meet any two of them for an autism diagnosis. That is, they also have to meet other qualifying criteria. Do you see why it's been said that no two autistic people are exactly alike? Well, in the official language, this part is described as restrictive, repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, or activities. And then the text notes that it must be manifest by at least two of the following, which I've noted already, that it has to be two of the four. So the first subcategory is stereotype or repetitive motor movements, use of objects, or speech. One example is lining up objects. For children, it might be toys. For adults, it might be action figures. Now, I know what you're thinking. You want to say to me, William, aren't action figures the same thing as toys? Well, I'll leave that topic for you to discuss in the comments section. My point here is that just because a person lines things up, it doesn't make them a little autistic. Now, it could be a sign to consider whether or not this person might be autistic. Again, you have to meet several criteria to qualify for a diagnosis. The second subcategory is insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines, or ritualized patterns of verbal or nonverbal behavior. So if your Uncle Steve or niece Alicia, and I don't have any relatives with those names, gets highly upset if you change plans or if they tend to eat the same food every day, then it doesn't mean, now say it with me, that they are a little autistic. So category number 3 is highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus. Common examples are the stereotypes of being fixated on trains or dinosaurs. That means a person is autistic. So only having a very narrow and intense interest in something doesn't make you autistic. Finally, for the fourth subcategory, this is hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. This is obviously known as just the sensory issues category. A person having issues in this area might mean that they are over or underreactive in the sensory realm, or they could be excessively interested in certain smells or touching certain objects. Again, that's just a few type of examples. As before, just because someone has problems in this realm, it doesn't automatically mean that the individual is autistic. The main theme, again, is that someone needs to have differences in all three of the first major criterion, and then any combination of two or more of the just discussed criterion. But that's not the end of the story. There are three more criteria that must be met, which I could mention them as they are briefly described in the DSM, but I won't because you really need to be a trained professional to completely understand them, or you need a lengthy explanation to comprehend it. Now, I do give a link in the description to where you can read about them. So, in conclusion, everyone is not a little autistic just because they have one particular characteristic that is associated with autism. Having said that, I do want to acknowledge that even if I had not skipped over the last part of the criteria, what I've stated is still incomplete. That's because I did not go into the fact that when a person is diagnosed autistic, currently, as of 2025, there is the detail of them having been classified as either level 1, level 2, or level 3. These levels have to do with what is called support needs, and understanding them, while important, is beyond the focus of what I wanted to address. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please leave your comments below, and if you have any questions, I will do my best to try to answer them. Also, please like and share this and other of my videos.